This is Triggerman, and today we are discussing the Blood Eagle. The Blood Eagle was an extremely brutal punishment reserved for the worst of the worst. But how did they do it? What was this ritual? Who were the men that performed and suffered this fate? Let's discuss all of these questions and more right now on Triggermen. Welcome back to another episode. Today we will be discussing one of the most brutal punishments ever devised by man. That's right, the Blood Eagle. This punishment was actually used in Scandinavia during the Viking era. It was also depicted in the 14th century poem called the Volsunga Saga. The punishment involved cutting open a man's back and then pulling out the ribs, after which a man's arms were cut off, and then the skin of his back was flayed and pulled away from the spine. The skinning would start at the shoulders and travel down to the ribs, leaving a trail of blood along the way. Once the skin had been removed, the back would be split down the middle so that the ribs could be pulled apart. Then the muscles were ripped away from the spine. Next, the lungs were pulled out and tied behind the victim's back with leather thongs. These thongs were then threaded through the ribs, allowing the executioner to pull the rib cage open like wings. Finally, the breastbone was broken, and the victim was left to bleed to death. During the Viking Age, there were very few laws protecting a person's life. A person could be killed for breaking another person's property, not being able to pay a debt, or even for being a member of a rival clan. Although murder was not socially acceptable, many murders went unpunished. If a person was murdered, their family members or close friends could take revenge. However, if the murderer belonged to a different clan or family, this was much more difficult. In some cases, the injured party would hire mercenaries to kill the murderer. However, hiring an assassin could be expensive and dangerous. If the assassin failed to complete their task, they may become the target of the murderer's family. Because of this, a new profession known as a Triggerman emerged. Triggermen were professional assassins hired to kill people outside the law. They were paid a fee up front and then given a weapon, usually a knife or axe, to carry out their mission. Once the Triggerman had completed their task, they would normally leave the area quickly before any witnesses could come forward and identify them. As the Triggerman was hired to complete a specific task, they were not concerned about taking a life. In their mind, they were simply doing a job. There is no exact record of when the term Triggerman came into use, but the word appears in several Old English and Scottish songs. One such song tells the story of two brothers who hired Triggermen to kill each other. In medieval Scotland, the term Triggerman referred to a type of hitman for hire. During this time period, murder was considered a great sin, and only the justice system had the power to punish a killer. So if someone was killed, the local sheriff would assemble a group of 48 men to hunt down the murderer and bring them to justice. It took a lot of manpower to find a killer, and so it was common for these men to be hired by wealthy landowners who had been unable to find the person responsible for killing their family member. The Triggermen would use whatever means necessary to catch up with the murderer, including torture and intimidation. In the late Middle Ages, Triggermen became increasingly popular throughout Europe, especially in England, where they began to form guilds. By the 16th century, the term Triggerman carried a negative connotation and was often used to describe a thief, cut-purse, or assassin. For example, in Shakespeare's play Othello, the villainous Iago refers to himself as a Triggerman when talking about his plan to kill Cassio. In modern times, the term Triggerman has fallen out of favor because it overlaps with the definition of hitman. Some believe that the term should be used only if the assassin is specifically targeting a person rather than a particular target. Regardless, the story of the Triggerman is a fascinating one that helps us understand the evolution of the modern world. But enough about the origin of the term Triggerman. Let's talk about the most extreme example of a Triggerman, the Blood Eagle. In the past, the term Blood Eagle referred to a Scandinavian warrior who fought for the sole purpose of obtaining the rank of Blood Eagle. However, over time, the term Blood Eagle has come to refer to a brutal Viking punishment. According to legend, this terrifying punishment was performed on a captured enemy soldier. To perform this ritual, a small team of executioners was required as well as a captive. First, the victim's entire back was marked with runes that symbolized the glory of Odin. The soldiers who participated in the battle where the captive was taken were each allowed to etch a rune onto the victim's back. After the runes were carved into the victim's skin, he was laid down on a stone altar. An elder started a fire in a large pit filled with rocks, while chanting incantations to Odin. He instructed 2 young men to pour a bucket of mead over the captive and cover him with resin and flax. When the victim was engulfed in flames, the executioners pulled him upright, and he was finally free from his earthly bonds. Another version of the Blood Eagle's origin story involves a Viking hero named Ragnar Lothbrok. He was captured by King Ella of Northumbria and sentenced to death by Blood Eagle. However, during the execution, Ragnar reportedly turned the tables and killed those who were attempting to execute him. He then reclaimed his freedom and returned home with many treasures and stories of his bravery. Even though the origins of the Blood Eagle are uncertain, it is clear that the ritual was a powerful symbol of Odin's influence during the Viking Age. The belief in Odin and his ability to grant warriors great strength and courage made the Blood Eagle a desirable honor for many Scandinavian warriors. Those who were subjected to the Blood Eagle ritual were often revered as heroes after the fact, as they had shown great strength and courage in the face of death. One famous example of a Blood Eagle occurred during the reign of King Sweyn Forkbard. In the year 986 AD, he led a Viking army to Northumbria, England. When they arrived, they demanded tribute from King Ella. However, when Ella refused, Sven decided to attack. The Vikings won the battle and captured King Ella, who was eventually subjected to a Blood Eagle ritual. Another example of a Blood Eagle occurring during Sven's campaign in England was the execution of Alella's brother, who was also captured during the battle. His executioners cut off both of his arms and legs before pulling out his lungs and placing them around his neck like a necklace. Finally, they carved out the shape of an eagle from his back, completing the transformation from man to bird. After these executions, Sweyn continued his campaign and defeated the English at the Battle of H. After his victory, he returned home and ruled over Denmark until his death in 1014 AD. Throughout his reign, he was known as a fierce warrior, and many believe that he was granted his strength and courage by Odin himself. This belief was further cemented when he was subjected to a Blood Eagle ritual after his death. If you are interested in watching an authentic recreation of the Blood Eagle ritual, there is a channel dedicated to the subject. On this channel, you can watch a step-by-step guide on how to perform the ritual, as well as historical reenactments of battles in which the ritual was performed. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.